what is the address of the emergency? Is that a house or an apartment? Ma'am?
It's a townhome.
Okay, what is the phone number you're calling from, ma'am?
Oh my God, I'm dying. I don't know.
Hey, ma'am, I need you to calm down because I can't hear you like that. Okay, ma'am, what is your first and last name? Ma'am, can you hear me?
I was on the graveyard shift. It was about 4:30 a.m. when I got the call. I just began driving. As I got closer, I turned on my body camera, not really knowing what to expect.
They started shooting.
Where were you guys at when this happened?
She was right here, and I was on the other side, in the other side of the seat.
I could see a female laying on the ground. She was shot multiple times. She didn't seem to be breathing from what I could see. It wasn't good. EMS workers immediately started CPR.
Did you see where it came from?
I know, the door just opened, and it was just pop, 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 pop.
What door opened?
Her door opened.
Her door opened?
Yes, her car side opened.
The female sitting next to her identified herself as Natasha Grimes Kelly, the woman who called 911. Natasha had mentioned that the injured woman was her friend Kiera.
Okay, just relax for me.
Go ahead and back up. We got more people trying to hit on the side. Yes.
Just back up. You say you were hit?
Yes, please.
Just, can you?
I had to go in to try to find my phone because I couldn't.
311, we're gonna need another ambulance.
Natasha said that, hey, I'm hit too. And she points in the direction of her like abdomen.
Gunshot, abdomen, right side up there.
This is gonna look like a good shooting, so start some more.
Turn around over here.
So I have 2 patients.
You got a gunshot wound right here. Okay. Do me a favor, go ahead and get down the seat.
As I was trying to gather her story, I just called for more medics to come take a look at her.
So you guys were right here, just sitting in the car.
Just sitting in the car, about to smoke a cigarette.
About to smoke a cigarette. Okay. Out of nowhere, you just heard shots.
I just hear I was asleep. I heard tussling.
Well, hold on. Slow down for me. Slow down for me.
Because I was asleep.
Okay, so were you asleep in the car?
I was asleep in the house.
You were asleep in the house?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I woke up.
You woke up?
And all I heard tussling, but there was nobody in the house.
Okay.
So I came outside.
Okay.
And I seen her car out here.
Okay.
Her story was kind of all over the place because she was hysterical.
So I go to get in the car and I sit down and I say, hey, what's going on?
Uh-huh.
And I'm asking her what's going on.
Okay.
And she's about to start talking to me. And somebody opened this door and just start shooting.
Somebody opened her door?
Opened her door.
She told me a random person ran up to their vehicle, opened the driver door, and began shooting. Latasha wasn't really able to give me a great description or even a description on who had done this. They had did it and just fled. Medical personnel transported them to the hospital. And then the doctors made the call that the woman laying on the ground did die. This is now a homicide. At the hospital, we were able to confirm her identity as 28-year-old Kiera Livingston.
My sister Kiera was the oldest. I'm the youngest. And we have my middle sister. It was 3 of us, you know, regular middle-class family. Kiera was like the big sister, but the mom. She's making sure hair's done.
Hey, swing Abby. Swing Abby.
It was always us together.
We met in high school. She really lit up the room. She just attracted everybody to her aura. We were high school sweethearts, and yeah, we kind of went from there. After high school, we had our first kid together. But like eventually we broke up.
She had 2 daughters. She loved our family. I actually, that day I was calling her because she was supposed to braid my hair. She's not answering my calls, but I'm still trying to, get the day going. I'm thinking what was going on. I didn't know anything that had happened.
My sister called me and she told me that something happened to Kiera. I called Kiera's mom and I could just hear it in her voice. When stuff like that happens, that it questions your faith. A lot of question was what happened, a lot of anger and a lot of, just frustration, like how, why, like why would you take her from my daughter?
So I just want to do a quick sweep, see if we have a crime scene back there.
Well, we got casings right here too.
Okay.
Right here under the wheels.
When we first arrived, we were out on another homicide that occurred 2 nights prior. And so lack of sleep played a huge role. Everybody was kind of wearing out, wearing down. And so my phone rang that morning at about 5:20 a.m. And you say goodbye to the family at the house because you don't really know when you're going to be home.
I remember getting on scene, silver sedan, sitting there with a driver's side door open, car was still running.
Multiple shell casings were in front of the car. The impact points to the outer door frame of the car, and then as you looked in the car, a gun magazine was laying kind of on the door jamb of the driver's side of the vehicle. And that was interesting because we don't normally see magazines outside of guns left at crime scenes. And so we look for fingerprints, we swab for DNA evidence.
They in here?
Yeah, well, she said she was upstairs asleep. She came down because she heard like a commotion. Who? Her.
I remember just talking to other officers, and Latasha's stories kind of all over the place.
Came down because she heard a commotion. Came out to smoke a cigarette. Was getting ready to smoke a cigarette. And then somebody came and opened her door and fired. Her story is still a little confusing to me.
Latasha did give some different statements to the responding officers, which sometimes it can happen because people have been at a traumatic event, people don't really remember.
So how did she get shot?
That's what I'm saying. It's not making a lot of sense.
She was a little scared, a little frightened on what had just happened. So it's like you're just trying to figure out what's going on. At that point, you want to secure your scene. We don't know if the shooter's still there.
I got an open door here, Arnston. Police department, anybody here?
There was a front door that was wide open to Latasha's house.
Latasha had given us consent to go in the residence.
Aurora Police, anybody in here?
For that brief moment, your adrenaline's pumping and it's almost like you're not even breathing. You never know what's going to be inside. You never know what you're going to encounter.
Police department, if you're inside, announce yourself now. We're coming in. Police department, if you're inside, announce yourself now. Police department, if you're inside, announce yourself now. We're coming in.
We know from officers on scene that Latasha had come from the house to the car.
Your police, if you're inside, make yourself known.
So the officers go back into the house to make sure they don't have a person hiding out that could harm anybody else.
You want to throw a block on that back one, and I'll check this one. Police department, anybody in here?
After clearing the residence, no one was found to be inside, but what I did notice was that the back sliding door was open. That immediately started ringing bells. Like, did the shooter run out of it? Did somebody come back through the house after this happened? It just gets your mind, makes your mind wonder.
There was a piece of mail with the name Cleveland Grimes on it. The mail address gives us an indicator that he's obviously living there. He's getting mail there. We really didn't know anything past that, whether he had any involvement, whether he was a witness to this, whether he had been another victim or anything.
So since we didn't find anybody in the residence, we then turn our investigation to the canvassing the area, talking to neighbors, talking to witnesses.
The sun's coming up, people are starting to wake up and come and go from their residences.
They were looking at the scene. There was a burgundy car that took off. I heard that there was a guy with a black hat. That's them right there.
Okay.
They were here last night. I don't know if they had anything to do with it, but they were here.
A neighbor said that he saw a burgundy car fleeing the scene. Who's really out at 4:30 in the morning, driving around that fast? So there's probability that it was involved.
It's very important that we identify this car to try to figure out if this is linked to the commission of the crime or not. The officer rushes over to the car, obviously to try to see who's in the car, while exercising some caution.
109, and I are making contact with possible witnesses. New log, Ocean.
She makes contact with the driver, who's a female, and does her own initial investigation.
See, I was just being nosy.
You're just being nosy?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm dumb.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So you don't know anyone that lives here?
I don't. Nope.
Okay.
I don't.
All right, and you don't know anything of what took place here at all?
Just said something about 2 people. That's all I know.
She did have a good timeline for her whereabouts. So the officer quickly realizes that a person inside the car had nothing to do with the shooting. Still important for us to be able to close that loophole, so we don't waste any more time going down rabbit holes that aren't going to help us with the investigation.
Stay outside of the line. I can talk to you, but I don't have any information.
I can't find my sister.
Okay.
At the scene, I observe a female arrive, and she keeps asking me, is it Kira? And at this point, Kira's car is still there. I can't tell her no. Sorry. And I tell her, yes, Kira's gone. And I remember she just completely collapsed.
She just held me because she knew I was hurt, and she knew that I'm the baby. Seeing her vehicle, I just lost my best friend. I lost my favorite person. That was the person that I was able to call for anything and everything, so I didn't take it too well.
She was struggling, and I had no reason to not give her a hug. That's kind of what you do as a human being.
That's my big sister. My blood. That's my blood.
You console other people when you see them in pain. And Ebony was obviously in pain.
That's my blood.
I appreciate her for doing that for me. I was really taken back. I blacked out. I couldn't even tell you much from there.
Yeah. Go ahead and call my cousin.
I'll call her.
Yeah, go ahead. Call her and... Oh.
Ebony wasn't the only family member that showed up on scene that morning. Kiara's mom, also showed up. I remember Kendra making a statement about all she knows is that it involved a man named Trey. And so at this point in the investigation, that's the first time that name had come up. Everyone was a bit excited about what the name Trey might lead to. Have we just had a breakthrough in the case? And where do we go from here? Who is this person? And is that our suspect? Kendra, Kiara's mom, has brought up Trey. We wanted to know about Trey. Who is he? Have you ever met him? Can you describe him? And so those are all the questions that we wanted answers to right away. Kendra knew Kiara and Trey had a relationship, that it was casual, but she didn't have anything that we could use for identification purposes. And so I continue with the interviews to help us connect the name Trey. We had identified another very close friend of Kiara's. Her name was agreed to come to the station and be interviewed.
First off, you classified yourself as best friends with Kiara. Okay, how long have you known her?
8 years.
How do you know Trey?
Through Kiara.
Was able to provide a lot more information about Trey and about the relationship that Trey and Kiara had.
They talked off and on, but they didn't have no relationship, and she actually hadn't even been talking to him lately. He was super jealous.
What?
He was crazy. He was a weirdo. Kiara went to the pub before with him, and she was to get a drink. And the guy's like, oh, you know, can I buy you a drink? She's like, no, I'm okay. Well, apparently Trey's watching all this and flips his weed. Super jealous. Or passive aggressive.
Did not speak kindly of Trey and expressed an opinion that Trey was very controlling and very jealous of Kiara.
I didn't think he would do this. I know it's crazy.
And so now we're starting to get an idea that this might have been involved with jealousy and aggression and anger, and that this might be Trey is our suspect.
Do you know Trey's real name?
Nobody knew his real name.
Everyone seemed to know who Trey is, that it is Trey, named Trey, but no one could provide Trey's actual name. We don't know who he is. And so that's extremely frustrating when you have this kind of information and you just haven't turned the corner to be able to figure out who this is and have a face to put with all of these pieces of information.
Kiara was a hairstylist. She wanted to open up her own little boutique, do hair, you know, have nice clothing lines. How loved she was. That was really nice.
It was unreal. At the funeral, I just wanted to be strong for my daughter. I just wanted my daughter to know, like, she still has her other parent and that I wasn't gonna, just crumble and fold on her.
We really just wanted the answers. So I was taken back because who would want to kill my sister? To murder my sister? Who would want to do that?
And so at this point in the investigation, we don't know who Trey is. Something else that we wanted to pay attention to was the other person there the night of the murder, Latasha.
And she's about to start talking to me, and somebody opened this door and just started shooting.
Somebody opened her door.
Opened her door.
We know that she knew the victim. What we did not know is what happened. Who was responsible for the shooting? The detectives made note that her account of the events don't really make any sense. Latasha received medical treatment at the hospital. It was determined that she was not shot.
She had some minor injuries, nothing that was life-threatening or severe.
And so that presents an interesting problem. In Latasha's account, she also was sitting in the passenger side of the car. We didn't know at that time what is going on and why. We needed to bring Latasha in for an interview at the police department to confront her with her inconsistent statements. And I remember her coming straight from the hospital and only being covered in like a hospital blanket.
I'll go deep. We're hoping to get your cooperation and getting as much information as we can to figure out what happened to your friend. Okay?
So I can't tell you. I just remember waking up and I wanted to smoke a cigarette.
Okay. What time did you come downstairs to smoke your cig?
4 something in the morning. But I forget my lighter. But I see the car sitting there. And I'm like, what the hell is about to come over here now? Like, what do people want? So I start walking up to the car, but I noticed that it's Kiera. So I say, hey girl, I know she smoked. What you doing? It's early. You got a light? I get in the car. And then I say, okay, I need the lighter. So I want to smoke a cigarette. But then she turned towards the door. And that was it. I just remember hearing 2 shots.
Okay. Where this happened last night, Latasha? Whose place is that?
That's my brother's house.
Yeah, what's your brother's name?
Cleveland.
Okay. Cleveland, what's his last name?
Grimes.
Okay.
Latasha confirmed that she and her brother, who she identified as Cleveland Grimes, were living at the residence, that he was staying there with her.
When they were doing the search warrant on the house, we saw that he's getting mail there.
Do you remember who was at the house last night? Who all?
I only seen 3 people.
Okay.
So Mike comes over with Bree. They sit down. Cleveland and them, they decide they're gonna go bowling. So I fell asleep.
You went out to smoke your cig, maybe 4:23-ish, and you went outside. Damn, I forgot my lighter. And you said, Kiara's, you saw a car there.
The lights is on.
Why was she there in the first place?
Probably to sleep with my brother, maybe.
Sleep?
Yeah.
Okay.
They meet up after the club. Everybody meets up after the club. You can look at my phone, and it'll tell you that not just her. Yesterday was a different girl.
Okay. Is your brother home?
No.
That you're aware of?
That I don't know.
Was anybody home that you're aware of?
Nobody was there.
Okay. She didn't say why she was there?
She didn't say nothing. I don't care. I just wanted the light.
Sure.
I 100% have no clue why that baby was outside that house tonight.
Latasha told detectives that she knew Cleveland to have multiple girlfriends, had a history of being in and out of relationships, and that was the same with Kira. At this point, we have to take into account, can this be a love triangle? Was Trey jealous of Kira seeing Cleveland? I don't recall that Latasha ever mentioned Trey or ever offered any information about him. So all of those kinds of things are still floating through our minds as we begin to put the pieces together. We don't know at this point, and so there's still a lot of work that we have to do. With where the investigation is so far, we know that Latasha and her brother Cleveland live at the residence on the street where this homicide occurred. We're looking for someone with the name Trey. The investigation is now painting a picture of some jealousy between Kira and Trey. And Cleveland, at this point, we need to get information about Trey because we want to locate him. We learned that the last person that was with Kira before night was her best friend, Lexi. And so that's an important interview to see what information she knew about Trey, to see where he was.
Lexi?
I interviewed Lexi with my partner. I remember her being delightful.
Our understanding, you saw her shortly before this went down.
We went down to Purple Martini, the club downtown. I don't know if y'all familiar, but we were at the club, so we were just dancing and, having fun. Sure. And then after that, the club was over. We went home. I mean, I don't have my car, so she brought me home.
The night of the murder, Lexi mentioned she and Kira had gone to the club and that they returned back to Lexi's house about 2 a.m. that morning. Lexi had said that Kira had gone to the bathroom. Lexi went to the bathroom and knocked on the door just to check on her and make sure she was okay.
And I hear her on the phone. I'm like, oh, she must be probably one of her boos or whatever. So
how would you describe the tone of that conversation?
The tone was a little bit heated, but not to the point where it's like you're arguing. Not like that. But the tone was kind of, like, back and forth. Yeah, like back and forth. Like you asking her something and she's telling you something like, blah, 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 or whatever.
Lexi mentioned to us that she could hear Kira on the phone. She had assumed she was talking to Trey based on what Lexi was able to overhear.
I just passed out and to sleep. I was already at home. So in the morning, that's when, Ebony started calling me and she's like, girl, where's my sister? And I'm like, I don't know. But I'm like, y'all calm down because she's probably just at Trey's house asleep and she can't hear the phone. And that was, my only thought was she's just asleep. And so they're like, well, you know where he lives? You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, yeah, I know where he lives.
Lexi said that morning she woke up and heard that Kira had been shot in front of Trey's house. Now the light bulbs are going on because now we have the first piece of information linking Trey to the location where this happened.
Thanks for talking.
Yeah.
We know from Latasha that she has identified her brother Cleveland Grimes living where this homicide occurred, and now we have Lexi identifying that that's also Trey's residence. And so we're putting the pieces together. If we're talking about the same person, Trey is Cleveland Grimes. Throughout the entire investigation, Latasha was not truthful. She knew things that she did not provide to us and made the investigation much harder.
Not just her. Yesterday was a different girl.
Okay.
We have come to a point in the investigation that we have probable cause to believe that Cleveland is the one that shot and killed Kira. We have people who are persons of interest in a case. We run their criminal history. We look up any other law enforcement contacts. What do they have a history of? Have they been known to possess weapons? And so all of that kind of research was done into Cleveland, and he really had a minimal criminal history. Attempts were made to try to contact him to see if he'd be willing to come in for an interview, and he was not willing to speak to any of us at the time. And so we're looking for additional pieces of evidence to build the case against Cleveland Grimes. One of the follow-up pieces of investigation that we often go back to is redoing the neighborhood canvas the night of the shooting. It's early in the morning and people don't want to answer the door. And so a lot of the doors that we knocked, we didn't get an answer to. And so we went back and contacted an individual who lived in the neighborhood and was familiar with the Grimes residence and familiar with Latasha and Cleveland. When we talked with her, she gave an account of what she remembered from that night when the shooting occurred.
Okay, Rakis, yeah, whenever you're ready, basically hoping to restructure the steps and ultimately leading you to look out that front window.
Okay, so the shots, I heard the 4 shots, or what I thought was 4 shots. And then I was like, I sat here and was like, I think there was shots. And then I got up, my window's always open, and I looked over here, like about, to kind of get an idea. And I tried to open the door. And then I just kind of did like this, and then noticed my mom was moving. And then I opened his door, and did just like this. I looked out the window, and like I said, I noticed what it looked like was my neighbor, and kind of looked a little bit more.
She remembered hearing the gunshots and identified a silver car parked in front of Latasha's house. And she saw a person standing in the driver's kind of door. She said that she recognized this person as her neighbor, Cleveland Grimes. And she was very adamant about what she saw and very adamant that she saw Cleveland.
Anything else you'd like to add or clarify?
No.
We start to get momentum here. And so that's a big deal at this point in the case. We're putting the pieces together, but don't have the full puzzle quite yet. We are also collecting video from all of the establishments in the area. One video in particular was very useful, and that was the hamburger stand across the street, right in front of the Grimes residence. So I know the camera's recording and I can see the street. And so I remember actually stopping the video and taking a breath and realizing I might have the crime on tape. Did I actually just capture this on tape, or is something gonna go wrong? I press play and I slow the video down, and it continues to play. And a car pulls up with the headlights on. And the car looks like the car that Kiera drove that night. And you can also see someone else come out of the residence and get into the passenger seat of Kiera's car. And we know from interviewing Latasha that that was her. And then you can see what looks like an interruption in the beams of the headlights, the approach of Cleveland as he approaches Kiera's door. And we know that it's Cleveland because the neighbor saw Cleveland at Kiera's door. And then you can see the muzzle flashes. And so the video actually depicts the muzzle flash in the exact time that the gun was fired. And so that was, again, a pivotal point in the investigation that we now know when Cleveland is firing shots in the car, Latasha is still in the passenger seat of the car. And after the shooting, we see Latasha get out of the car. We can see Cleveland leave and go back into the house, and we can see Latasha kind of moving around and a little bit unsure of what to do.
Latasha went back and forth between the car and the townhome numerous times after the shooting occurred. It took her a while to call 911.
It was about 20 minutes. And so if we look at her initial statements to police when police and medical personnel arrived, Latasha's on the ground. She's screaming, she's crying, she's asking for help.
I hit on the side. Yes.
Just back up. You say you were hit?
Yes, please.
This was not what we see on the hamburger stand video. Had Latasha called 911 right away? Could medical attention have been given to Kiera sooner? Yes. Could have that made a difference in the outcome of this case? I don't know. And that's unfortunate. Our fugitive apprehension team went to his place of employment and arrested Cleveland. And he was taken into custody without incident and transported to headquarters to again attempt to get his side of the story.
Mr. Grimes? Call you Cleveland? Yeah, that okay, sir. Cleveland, I'm Detective Fredrickson. This is my partner. Cleveland, you have the right to remain silent, sir. Do you understand? Yeah. Having these rights in mind, you wish to talk to us now, sir?
I've been getting a lot of threats, and the jails talk faster than the streets do, so y'all could just put me to myself to where I don't have to fight every day or whatever's going on. Then we'll go from there.
Okay, well, it's a yes or no. Question, Cleveland. The question is, sir, having those rights in mind, you wish to talk to us now about this incident, sir?
No.
No? No. Okay.
He essentially said, I want an attorney, and didn't want to talk, and so the interview ended rather quickly. To this day, we have never recovered the gun. It is still outstanding, and I don't know where it is. But we were notified that the fingerprints we collected from the car off the driver's door and off of the gun magazine that we located in the car, both of those items had fingerprints that match Cleveland Grimes. Throughout the entire investigation and through the witness statements, and we learned the motive for a reason why Cleveland would want to kill Kiera. Cleveland was a jealous boyfriend and was angry about some of the things that Kiera had done. And so he shot and killed Kiera. Cleveland Grimes was charged with murder 1 and was found guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Latasha was not planning the murder with Cleveland, but the video helps us to establish the obvious attempts to increase the likelihood that her brother could get away. Latasha was not truthful.
Based on all the facts and information we found within this case, Latasha Grimes was charged with being an accessory to the murder. He was convicted of it and sentenced to 2 years Department of Corrections with 36 months of parole.
With this case and the violent nature of how Kiera was killed, it felt good for us to be able to bring a conclusion. I think about this family frequently, and I know they must miss her. And so I hope they have peace. I hope they know we tried our best. And I hope they know that Kiera was important to us.
We'll never get my sister back, you know what I mean? But the guy's sister, she waited. She did not call the ambulance or the police once it happened. You're one of the reasons why my sister's no longer here. You could have took the time as a human being to save a life. My sister could possibly still be here with us.
This dude took her life, and so you have your moments of, damn, like, what could I have done, you know?
She's not gonna be able to see her daughters go to prom. She's not gonna be able to see her daughters graduate. She's not gonna be able to open that hair salon like she wanted to do, and that's just not fair.
We've been trying to make her proud, you know. Her daughter's been trying to, you know, do her best to make her proud. She wants to be just like her mom.
She's leaving behind 2 young girls that may open up that dream hair salon that she's always wanted. She always wanted to be a mother, and she held that down to the T.
All right, so I am back in front of a literal fire because you guys loved the last fire episode that we did, the last campfire episode. And on today's campfire episode, I have a great ghost story. Not only is the story itself super creepy, but I'm telling you, the plot twist at the very end, worth sticking around for. You got to listen. It's a great story. I know you're going to love it. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious, delivered in story format, then you've come to the right fire pit, because that's all we do. And we upload 2, 3, even 4 times every week. So, if that's of interest to you, please invite the like button to come join you at a nice cozy campfire. But as soon as they sit down and they get their s'mores ready, just immediately get a fire extinguisher out and put out the fire. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. One afternoon in the winter of 2015, a 57-year-old woman named Patricia Dar was sleeping on her couch inside of her home in France when the sound of her phone dinging woke her up. Patricia slowly opened her eyes, and she felt groggy and confused. She'd been relaxing and watching a movie since she had the day off from her job as a reporter for a local radio station, but she realized, she must have dozed off. And so, Patricia, she grabbed her phone and she checked her notifications, and she saw she had a text message, but from a number that she didn't recognize. And what it said was really weird. It said, quote, "The castle wants you. The castle is calling you. Come." And for a second, Patricia just had no idea what this meant. Couldn't make sense of what this even said. But then she realized there was actually text messages that she had received earlier from this number, and she realized who it was. So the person texting Patricia this strange message was this middle-aged woman named Baron. About 8 months earlier, Baron had approached Patricia while she was out in public and told her that she desperately needed Patricia's help because Baron said she worked in a castle and that castle was haunted. So Patricia, in addition to being a local news reporter, was also a self-proclaimed psychic medium, meaning she basically believed that she had the ability to contact the dead. That was something she was really passionate about. And in fact, she was fairly famous for being a psychic medium in France. So, this request was actually not that bizarre for Patricia. But because of Patricia's status, both because she was, a famous medium, and also because she was on the news, she was sort of well-known, and then it drew a lot of people to her claiming that they had, paranormal issues ranging from, thinking they saw a ghost to their house is haunted or whatever. And almost all the time when Patricia would follow up with some people who claimed they had issues, she would discover that, despite her best efforts, there clearly was nothing going on that was paranormal. There was no dead to talk to. It was just like, drafty windows or a house settling or, just a shadow that looked really eerie or something. So the vast majority of times people approached Patricia, she really didn't take them that seriously. So a couple of months ago, when Baron had approached Patricia, her reaction to it was basically like, "Oh, your castle's haunted." "Yeah, I bet." But she was polite about it. But realistically, she didn't believe it was true. But because Baron was sort of persistent, really demanding help from Patricia, Patricia did give her phone number, sort of to be polite. And then immediately afterwards, Vaughn had texted Patricia, and those were the text messages that Patricia had, in the thread. But Patricia had intentionally ignored them. But now, here was Baron texting her once again with this sort of weird cryptic message, again, about this haunting of her castle. And this actually kind of piqued Patricia's interest. And because Patricia did have a day off here, she actually felt inspired to follow up and maybe go check out this castle and see what this haunting was all about. An hour and a half later, Patricia pulled up in front of this small cottage that was on the same property as the castle. She knew from earlier text messages that this cottage was where Baron actually lived. And so Patricia parked, she got out. She walked up to the front door of the cottage and she knocked, but nobody answered. And so after a few moments, she tried knocking again, this time a little bit louder. And then the door did open, but it was not Baron. It was this man, this middle-aged man who looked very confused to be seeing Patricia standing there. And just from the look on his face, Patricia immediately launched into this, explanation of why she was here. Oh, is Bara here? I was speaking to her via text message. And the man still, he's looking at her like, what are you doing here? What's going on? But then from behind him out walks Baron. And when she looked towards the door and she saw Patricia standing there, Baron was practically weeping. I mean, she was so happy and clearly relieved to see Patricia. And she's just like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming. This is unbelievable. Thank you. Like we really need your help. And then, before Patricia could ask any questions, Baron pointed to the man that had opened the door for Patricia and seemed so confused. And at this point, his expression had softened quite a bit. And Baron said, this is my husband. This is Remy. And he too is so relieved you're here. And so at this point, Patricia, she shook his hand. And she smiled at them both and was like, yeah, I don't know what I can do for you. You know why? Don't you fill me in? All I know is apparently your castle over there is haunted. Can you tell me the story? And so Baron, she had to kind of compose herself because she was quite emotional just to see Patricia here. But, after collecting herself, she told Patricia that about a year ago, her husband Remy had been hired as the caretaker of that castle and that she had just come along to help. And she said, at first, both of them had been really excited for this opportunity because it came with free housing in this cottage. However, Baron said that they had only been working here for a couple of weeks when really weird stuff started to happen. Baron said that she'd be in the castle doing, daily chores and she would know that she's the only one in the castle. Yet she would suddenly hear what were obvious footsteps of people walking and running around on the upper floors of the castle. And at this point, Remy chimed in and he said, yeah, me too. Like, I've heard those footsteps in the castle when I know it's totally empty. But even stranger then, that is Remy said he'd be in the castle and he would hear voices and not just, people whispering or something like you see in the movies. No, he would hear people screaming at the top of their lungs like in other distant parts of the castle that he couldn't see. And it was terrifying. As Patrick Yaye listened to Remy and Baron tell the story, Patricia was struck by how earnestly they came across. I mean, they definitely were shaken by whatever they experienced inside of that castle. Like, they were genuinely troubled and didn't know what to do about it. I mean, Remy still had this job at the castle. They still had to go in there, but it was becoming like this big issue and they didn't know what to do about it. As Patricia was listening to the couple tell the story, she couldn't help but feel like they were being very honest. They seemed very earnest as they're telling the story, like they weren't trying to dramatize. They were trying to relay what amounted to, trauma. They both clearly did. Not like going in the castle. It was like this thing they had to do due to Remy's job. But they were trapped. They felt like we don't know what to do here. And no one's taking us seriously. But at the same time, Patricia is a veteran, psychic medium, and she's been to numerous house calls, numerous haunted homes. And many times, the screams people think they hear in their home or, like, the sound of wind coming in through an open window, and the footsteps are like, a pet somewhere in the house. So there could easily be, a reasonable justification here. But it seemed apparent that there was enough here that It certainly warranted Patricia actually going to the castle and having a look around. And so she said, okay, let's go. Let's go see the castle. A few minutes later, Patricia followed Baron and Remy along this wooded path. From the cottage over to the castle. Even from pretty far away, the castle was huge and very intimidating. There were two very tall round towers on either end, and in the middle was a slightly shorter section that was decorated with a bunch of turrets. The castle only had 2 windows that were visible from the front where they were approaching. And for a second, as Patricia was looking at it, she had this sort of uneasy feeling that the windows were the eyes on the castle and the castle was looking at her. But she shook the feeling off and kept walking along. And a few minutes later, they reached the castle's huge front door. And at this point, Remy pulled out this huge key ring covered in keys, and he unlocked the door. And then he kind of stepped aside and pushed it open, sort of gesturing for Patricia to make her way inside. Now, Patricia was doing her best to be very professional, and not quite buy into the hype, at least not yet. This could be something completely rational. But when Patricia walked into the castle, she found herself inside of this huge empty space called the Great Hall. And the first thing she noticed was really how dark and cold it was inside. I mean, this was a castle, of course, and so that was sort of the atmosphere you'd expect, but this felt like eerie. Like, this was not a place you'd want to spend a lot of time. And also it just felt like the atmosphere was just heavy. Somehow. Like it really was just a tense place to be. Patricia took a deep breath and kind of centered herself. And then she looked around a bit more closely and she saw there were a few windows on the back wall, but they were all shut. And then right in front of her was this huge stone staircase. And to her right and to her left, she could see there were long hallways that she knew must lead to dozens of rooms potentially. And so, after standing there for a few moments, just kind of taking in the scene, Patricia turned to Baron and she asked her, she said, okay, so you've heard footsteps, upstairs when this place was empty. Can you tell me what you were doing? In any of the instances where those sounds came through, like what were you doing? Do you remember? And then Baron said, actually, yeah, I do remember. The last time it happened, I was closing the shutters on the window, and I know I heard people upstairs when I was doing that. And so immediately Patrick is thinking, oh, that could be it. Maybe it was literally the sound the shutters were making that maybe somehow gave Baron the impression that there were footsteps elsewhere inside of this castle. I mean, everything echoes inside of here. It's this big cavernous space. It was possible. And so Patricia's like, okay, well, let's go test the shutters. Let's just see if maybe that is causing some strange sounds in your home. And Baron and Remy did not seem remotely offended by this. If anything, they were like eager to find a rational explanation for whatever it was they were experiencing. And so quickly they, along with Patricia, walked over to one of the windows, and Patricia reached out, and she opened up the shutters, and then shut the shutters, and then did it a few more times. But there were no strange sounds. There certainly were no sounds of footsteps running around inside of the castle. Like there was no way that the shutters were making sounds that you could confuse for footsteps. Like this was not it. However, Patricia decided she would, just in case, try another shutter. See if maybe one of the other shutters made strange sounds just to confirm really this is not the case. But as she reached for this other shutter, before she even touched it, there was this loud, sudden, high-pitched shrieking sound that echoed all through the castle from upstairs. And then it just went deadly silent. And immediately, the hairs on the back of Patricia's neck stood up. I mean, this was like an unmistakable sound. And Patricia, she turns to Remy and Baron, and they're obviously spooked. I mean, they've experienced stuff like this, but this is still just so terrifying. And Patricia, she's standing there, not even sure what to do, but then she tells herself like, wait a minute, that couldn't have been what we thought. There's no way that was like some screech coming from some ghost. Upstairs. Like, there has to be a logical explanation here. And part of the reason she was thinking this is even in, her time as a psychic medium. Nothing this visceral had ever happened in her career. Something like that was out of a movie, like literally a ghost screeching upstairs. And so Patricia turns to the couple and she's like, look, obviously I heard that too. But let's not rule out that could have been the wind or something. Let's not jump to conclusions here, okay? Let's be rational. Let's be pragmatic. Let's just search the castle and see what we're up against. And so the couple, Remy and Baron, they did not seem reassured, but they kind of nodded along. Like, whatever you say. But then, like before anyone could do anything else, there was another sudden, loud, high-pitched scream coming from somewhere else upstairs. A different voice is now screaming upstairs. And then it went deadly silent again. And then it was very clear to Patricia and certainly to the couple that this castle might just be haunted. There's something going on here that is not right. However, as Patricia is standing there kind of trying to get her bearings of like what she should even suggest they do, because suddenly she is like the expert in charge of the response here, before she could even think. She had this very powerful feeling come over her that she would sort of describe as like a pull. It was like a magnet was pulling her in the direction of these screams. Like she felt like she needed to go upstairs to the second floor, to wherever those screams came from. She had to. And it wasn't even clear if this was like her channeling her psychic medium powers. It was like the castle was pulling her deeper and deeper inside of the structure. And so without even telling Remy and Baron what she was doing, Patricia just kind of silently turned and began walking almost against her will towards that stone staircase that went up to the upper levels. And now at this point, the castle is deadly silent. All you can hear is the sound of their footsteps as they're making their way over towards the staircase. And Remy and Baron, they're so frightened. They're just, tucked up right behind Patricia, following her along, not even sure what they should be doing. And so upstairs they went, and Patricia, again, she's got like this intense feeling that she has to go upstairs. She can't even control it. And so up the stairs she goes. No one's talking. All they hear is the sound of the footsteps on the staircase. And up they go, all the way up to the third floor, which is, where these screams were likely coming from. And at that point, Patricia almost on instinct turned left and began walking down this long hallway with all these doors that were shut along the way. And again, the castle is just deadly quiet. All you can hear are their footsteps. And down the hallway they go, all the way to a dead end where there is a single room that is shut at the very end of the hallway. And at this point, Patricia, almost like without even thinking, she turns and kind of almost aggressively says to Remy, "Get your keys out and open this door." Like she didn't even know why she was being aggressive. It was like just coming through her. But Baron at this point, she chimes in and says, the owner of the castle, they told us this is the one room we're not allowed to go in. We've never been inside of here. We can't go in here. Patricia, she just looks at Baron and says, "I don't care. We have to go in. Open the door. I'm going in. I have to go in this room." And so at this point, Baron, she looks at her husband, and Remy kind of shrugged. I mean, they didn't even know what they're supposed to do at this point, but they figured, all right, she's the expert. Let's let her go in. And so Remy pulled out his big set of keys, and he fumbled through them all. And Patricia, she's rearing to go in this room. She can't even understand why she feels this way. And Remy, he reaches over, he turns the lock, he pushes the door open, and Patricia walks inside. Now, as soon as this door opened up, Remy and Baron got a look inside of this room, and it was unremarkable. It was like a vacant room. There was nothing inside of it. Like, there was no clear reason why this room was off limits per the owner. But as they watched Patricia walk to the middle of the room sort of slowly and methodically, and come to a stop right in the middle with her back to them. They could have sworn they heard whispers suddenly picking up inside of this room, even though there's nobody else in there but Patricia. And then Patricia, who by this point was sort of, freaking out. Baron and Remy, she was acting just very different than when she had first arrived. She just stood there in this sort of bizarre way, just like rigid, staring towards the back of this room as these whispers are kind of going on in this dark room. And then from the threshold, Baron and Remy watched as Patricia, who has not turned around yet, or anything, she just began to twitch, like her shoulders were moving around. Funny, and her neck was snapping in a strange direction. And then she began letting out this just awful croaking sound, this constant single tone croaking sound. And it went on for so long that you'd think she would have needed to take in a breath to then continue this croaking sound. But she didn't. It just went on, and on just emanating from her body. And, Remy and Baron, they're terrified at this point for a host of reasons. But really it's now Patricia that's scaring them the most. And Patricia, she's twitching and croaking. She suddenly stops and whips around and looks at the couple, and her mouth is open like her jaw is slack, and this croaking sound is still coming out of her, but clearly she's also weeping. Tears are coming down her face. Now Remy and Baron, they are beyond terrified at this point for so many reasons, but they clearly know some kind of crisis is unfolding with Patricia, and they want to help her. And they were about to ask her, what can we do? What's going on, when there's this loud slamming sound somewhere else in the castle on one of the lower levels. It sounded like a door slamming shut, but really loud, and it was like the noise snapped Patricia out of whatever trance she was in. And suddenly she became really focused, and then instead of communicating with the couple, she just bolted right past them, sprinted down the hallway, and ran down the stairs, like she was chasing after the sound that had just been made somewhere downstairs. And so Remy and Baron, they're like, what else can we do but follow her? And so they run down the hallway, several, lengths behind Patricia, who's somewhere downstairs. And they get down to the second floor, the couple does, and they can hear the sound of movement in one of the rooms down the hallway. And then they hear this loud, animalistic yelling sound that appears to be, Patricia yelling or growling or something somewhere in one of these rooms. And so they make their way in that direction, and they see there's this open door that leads into a bedroom, and then there's a bathroom off the bedroom. They go in, and they look in that bathroom, and there's Patricia, and her back is to them, and she's on her knees, and she's visibly weeping, and she's looking up at something in the room. She was kind of at an angle where they could see her face, and her face is contorted just in horror, and she's seeing something in the bathroom that is just completely terrifying her, but there's nothing in the bathroom. And so, Remy and Bara, they walk in there, and they grab Patricia, who did not want to leave, but they drag her out of the bathroom. They stand her up, and they literally forcibly remove her from the castle. Several hours later, Baron and Remy were back inside of their cottage, sitting in their living room, with all these papers scattered in front of them on their coffee table. And next to them was Patricia, who by this point, she was basically back to normal, but she was still very shaken up by what happened in the castle. And also by this point, she was able to explain to the couple what had happened. From her perspective in the castle, she basically told them that she did basically, go into a trance. She had a psychic medium experience, but she had never had anything like this before. This was visceral. This was way beyond anything she had ever experienced in her entire career. According to Patricia, when she had walked into that locked room on the 3rd floor of the castle, the forbidden room, the room was not empty. When she went in there, she had that calling to go in there. And as soon as the door opened, what she saw was a room filled with people, with basically entities, ghosts, if you will. Baron and Remy couldn't see them, but Patricia could. And she said all these entities were wearing different clothes, from different time periods. There were people in medieval peasant outfits, And there were people wearing Victorian dresses, and there were people wearing, very modern 20th century business suits. But that really wasn't the initial impression that Patricia got. That was just something she noticed. What she immediately picked up on when she was called into that room and saw these entities is how lost and sort of scared these ghosts seemed. Like they were in trouble. And Patricia, she said she felt like she was pulled into the center of the room and then felt kind of anchored there. And as she stood there, these ghosts basically began crowding in on her like they were trying to get her help by getting closer to her. But she felt like overcome with this almost claustrophobic feeling of being suffocated by their sadness, not even by their physical presence. It was like their loneliness and desperation was like washing over her. And it was so awful it made her weep. And then eventually Patricia said she was able to kind of force her body to whip around and look at least in the direction of the exit because she wanted to leave at this point. And it was at that point that, she's making this groaning sound which she didn't even recall. And she hears this loud slamming sound which was the door slamming downstairs, and that kind of spooked the entities away from her, and she was able to bolt from the room. And Patricia said when she got out into the hallway and basically began maneuvering in the direction of the slammed door, because again she had this intense sense of being pulled in the direction of this noise. She said it felt very different than when she had been pulled up to the 3rd floor. She said now in retrospect when she had been pulled up there, what she was being pulled by didn't seem malevolent. It seemed, neutral or maybe even positive. But as soon as she was going in the direction of this slammed door down on the 2nd floor, she said it felt totally different. There was obviously like a dark presence, like something bad was pulling her towards them. But still, almost against her will, she ran down the hallway. She went down the stairs and she made her way into that bedroom, with Baron and Remy following closely behind. And Patricia said she eventually turned and went into this bathroom in this bedroom. And when she went in there, she saw something that was so terrifying she just fell to her knees and began to scream. That was that, like animalistic wailing sound that the couple heard. What she saw was this enormous tall, just like dark figure. It was a ghost of this tall man of sorts with like these deep scars all over his face, and he was wearing this rusted chain mail armor like he was from a different time, and he just seemed evil like a dark presence, and she knew that was the feeling she was getting. It was coming from this ghost, and it was only because Remy and Baron came in and basically pulled her away that she thinks she even survived. Like she was being pulled to her death. Like that's the way it felt. But again, fortunately, she's pulled out of the castle. They go back to the cottage. Patricia, had her chance to calm down. And now the 3 of them were trying to basically decipher what just happened. Like what can we take from this unbelievable story that Patricia has told us and what they witnessed? And what they quickly settled on was, we have a lot that we can begin to explore here, but let's focus on that evil entity. That tall man in the rusted chain mail armor. Who was that? And what did he want? So, she and Remy, in the hours since they had escaped the castle, had gathered up a bunch of their historical documents about the castle and laid them out on the coffee table, and they had begun going through them to try to learn about this guy. And at some point as they were looking through all these documents, there was one particular section that, for whatever reason, just drew, Patricia's attention. She just thought, I want to look at that. And it was the section about a knight whose name was Jean, who had lived in the 14th century. And the document said that Jean had been a soldier during the 100 Years' War, which was a conflict between England and France that had started in the mid-300s. And during that war, the castle was used as a French military fortress, and Jean was killed during a battle at the castle. And so after Patricia read this out loud to Baron and Remy, Patricia said she just had this feeling that the evil spirit, the tall man in the armor she saw in the bathroom that scared her so much, she had a feeling that she didn't know why, but that seemed like John. However, even If Patricia had been right that this evil spirit she encountered was Gene, they still didn't know why he was there, or why he had appeared, and why he had called her to the room, or why any of this stuff had happened. The whole thing really was unexplained here, or you know who were the other ghosts who were up on the 3rd floor, that apparently Patricia saw. None of it made any more sense. At some point, Baron asked Patricia, what do you think? What does all this mean? Why did this happen? And what do you think? But Patricia, she really was still very shaken up by this. I mean, she was this, renowned psychic medium, but again, she had never had an experience like this. I mean, this was really terrifying. And she just was like, look, I am overwhelmed. I need to go home. I need to go home and just think about this. I need to process what's happened here. And so, obviously Remy and Baron, they couldn't really protest, but they also were like, man, I really don't want to be left here alone with this horrifying castle. But you do what you got to do. And Patricia, she got up and she left. After Patricia left, Baron and Remy both agreed that, despite the fact that Remy was the groundskeeper here and did need to look after the castle, that for now it was just too dangerous to go in there. It was not worth it. And so they would stay away at least until, Patricia came back and they could get to the bottom of this. And for a couple of days, with Remy and Baron staying away from the castle like they had normal lives. I mean, nothing strange happened at all. They just basically lived in their cottage and went about their lives sort of keeping the castle over here. But after a couple of days when still Patricia had not come back again, she was still at her home, still processing this whole thing. Baron started having this weird feeling in her chest. It was like this need to go to the castle. Not dissimilar from how Patricia had described this overwhelming sense of being pulled up to the 3rd floor when she was describing her whole encounter, her whole experience. Baron, she tried to act like this wasn't happening to her, but she couldn't deny it. It's like she just had this feeling of, I gotta go to the castle. I gotta go over there. And then one day, Remy looked out the window of the cottage and he sees his wife Baron walking right towards the front door of this castle, and he's thinking, there's no way she should be going in there. We agreed not to go in. What is she doing? And he literally ran over there and grabbed her and pulled her back before she went into the castle, which is exactly what she was going to do. And then when she was pulled away, she couldn't even describe why she was over there. She's like, I don't even know. I just felt like I had to come over here. I can't explain it. But that wasn't even the strangest thing that happened over these few days after the incident with Patricia, because shortly after Baron almost walked back into the castle. A man had come on the castle grounds. This random man sort of wandered on to the castle grounds and was apparently being drawn, although he kind of framed it differently. He didn't really know why he was there, but he was drawn towards the castle. And as he's walking towards this castle, a deer presumably was also being drawn to the castle, and the deer went running towards the castle and actually rammed into this man and hurt him badly enough. He had to be hospitalized. He actually lost an eye from being hit by this deer. And so after this happened, even though Baron J and Remy were trying to respect Patricia, sort of giving herself some space here because she hadn't come back, she hadn't been in touch at this point, they were like, we have to get in touch with her. She's the only other person who understands, how serious this is. And so Baron called Patricia and she said, whatever is going on in the castle, whatever dark energy is existing in there, it's getting stronger. Now, at first, Patricia was not inclined to come back. I mean, there was a reason. She had not been in touch with them since she had left. She had basically decided, I don't want this in my life. This is terrifying. I don't know what happened, but I don't want this in my life. But she could just tell that, Baron and Remy, they were at their wits' end here, and they didn't know what to do. They were lost, and they were turning to Patricia more like a friend, hey, please come back here and then support us and help us get through this. And so Patricia did agree to go back. And so sure enough, the following evening, Baron, Remy, and Patricia were back inside the castle in the second-floor bathroom, where Patricia had been found at the end of that horrible experience looking up at what she believes now was Jean's ghost, this terrifying entity. And so they're in this bathroom, and Patricia had come in here in order to basically attempt an exorcism. And so she's standing in this bathroom, and sort of behind her is Baron and Remy, and they're kind of holding each other, and Baron is so scared she's shaking, and they're watching as Patricia, despite her own fears, she was very calm, and she was standing there with her eyes shut, and she was sort of trying to channel Jean's energy, because she didn't have that feeling being pulled, in any direction inside the castle. She was sort of choosing to channel whatever spirit was inside of this bathroom. And then at some point, Patricia appeared to sort of connect with something in the room, something that, Baron and Remy couldn't see. The room appeared to be empty to them, but it was obvious that Patricia had sort of picked up on something. And then kind of out of nowhere, she said in this very stern, very loud voice, "Johann, show yourself." And then Baron and Remy, they're staring at Patricia, 'cause again, there's nothing else they can see in this room. And Patricia, she opens her eyes and she kind of looks around the room, and then she focuses on something on the other side of the bathroom, like she can clearly see something, like she's seeing another entity or something. Baron and Remy are looking, and there's nothing they can see. And then Patricia again, still very focused, eyes locked on whatever it is in the room. She says again in that stern, loud voice, "It's over. You have to move on." Like she's instructing, this entity, presumably Jean's entity, that he needs to go. He needs to move on. And for a second, it's just silent in the bathroom as Baron and Remy kind of wait to see what's going to happen. Like, is Patricia going to go into another trance here? Like, what's going to happen? But Patricia, she seemed very calm, very forceful, and she's staring still towards the back of the bathroom. Nothing happens. Nothing happens. It's silent. And then Patricia again says, "It's over. You have to move on." And this time, after the second time that, Patrick EIA is given this command, Baron and Remy, they heard the sound of banging on a door upstairs, on the third floor, basically right above them. And then they hear the sound of shuffling footsteps all over the place. And then the sounds of mournful crying, and there's more banging. And and Baron and Remy, they're holding each other. They're so scared. Patricia's unmoved. She's just standing there anchored in the room, and all this commotion's happening upstairs, and then suddenly they hear the distinct sound of a door flying open, and then all these footsteps rushing down the hallway mixed in with the sound of crying. But it was not crying like sad. It was blissful crying. It was tears of joy as whoever was up there was charging down the hallway, down the steps, and out of the castle. At this point, it was like a calm fell over the whole castle, and Patricia, she turned away from, whatever else was inside of the bathroom, and she looked at Remy and Baron, and she smiled. And she said, "It's over. It's okay. Everything's okay." Now Patricia would tell them that she was able to actually channel the ghost that had been in the bathroom, that evil entity. And she said, it was Jean. It was his ghost, and that he had been haunting their castle because he didn't know he was dead. He was stuck in a sort of purgatory where he believed he was still fighting the 100 Years' War. And so every time somebody died inside of this castle over the many, many years that he had been here, he would take their spirit prisoner up in that room on the third floor. Those were prisoners. But Patricia during this exorcism had said to him, "It's over. Like the war is over. It's time to move on." And he understood that she was saying, the war is over. And at that point, Jean is the one who freed the prisoners on the third floor. That was the sound of all the prisoners being released. They were all so happy, and they fled the castle. And then at that point, Jean himself, his spirit was finally able to rest. However, there's one more wrinkle to this story, which is shortly after the exorcism when life sort of returned to normal for all parties. Patricia and Baron were speaking, and Patricia at some point just kind of offhandedly said something like, "You know, it's a good thing, Baron, that you texted me again and got me to come back out here, because clearly I was able to help you. Guys, I was able to, free these spirits from the castle. What a good thing it was that you texted me again." And Baron said, "What do you mean?" And Patricia was like, when you texted me about how the castle was sort of calling me, you were right. Like, clearly it was, and I came over and we took care of it. But Barrage was like, "I haven't texted you in months. I didn't send that text message." And Patrice, she pulled out her phone and she showed her the text where it was like, "The castle is calling you. The castle is calling you. Come." And Baron was like, "Yeah, I didn't send that to you." And to this day, Patricia, Baron, and Remy still have no idea who sent that text to Patricia. All right, thank you all so much for joining me tonight at the campfire. And if you enjoyed this, remember we actually have a whole playlist of campfire episodes that are ready for you to binge right now. If you want to do that, go ahead and click right here and give them a watch. All right, until next time, see you.